The endless void stretched before them, a black canvas pierced only by the fading embers of dying stars. Silence reigned, a silence that carried the weight of inevitability, the hush before a storm, before the slaughter would come. Thousands of vessels lingered in formation above Royan Prime, the brittle image of an alliance born not from faith, but from survival. High Captain Zorth stood firm upon the command deck of the Sovereign Ryua, his claws dug into the cold railing as his gaze locked on the tactical holoscreen. The Armada was a patchwork of civilizations, each fleet reflecting its own design, its own strengths. Human warships bristled with kinetic guns and layered shields, Royan dreadnoughts built for sheer destructive might, and the sleek, energy-efficient cruisers of the Tari. But against the Erebus, would any of it be enough? Zorth's eyes drifted toward the Indomitable, humanity's most dreaded warship. Even among the gathered armadas, it stood apart, armor black as the void, its silhouette crouched like some ancient beast waiting to strike. Pounce! Captain Elias Grant, the man who had first sounded the alarm of the coming nightmare, commanded that ship. He was the one who had seen the Erebus up close, and somehow lived to tell the tale. The silence did not last. A ripple stirred across the void, faint at first, as though the cosmos itself had drawn a sharp breath. Then the darkness split open. They had come. The first Erebus vessels did not register on scanners. They did not warp in, nor emerge from familiar lanes of travel. They simply were. One heartbeat the void was empty, the next their grotesque shapes loomed in existence. Ships, creatures, something between both. It was impossible to see where biology ended and machine began. Living metal twisted across their forms, plating that shifted into ever-changing patterns. Some glowed with a sickly light, their hulls draped with the skeletal remains of countless victims. Others were husks of assimilated ships, warped into unholy silhouettes, ghosts made flesh and alloy. Then they moved. The lead Erebus monstrosity surged forward, splitting apart like an unfolding insect, exposing a writhing mass of tendrils tipped with glowing green fire. 100 organic lances lashed out, streaking across the dark like whips of liquid death. Shields up! Fire all batteries! Admirals shouted in unison. Chaos ignited. Humanity fired first railgun rounds, screaming through the void with meteor-like fury. Some struck true, tearing blackened armor apart in flashes of violet flame. Others dissolved mid-flight, erased before impact. Already, the Erebus had adapted. Royan dreadnoughts followed, their plasma lances cutting through strange flesh-metal hulls, forcing them to convulse as if alive. The Erebus answered. The first Tari cruiser never stood a chance. A spiraling beam sliced through its shields like paper. In an instant it was gone, not destroyed, but consumed, its matter pulled into the Erebus hull like water swallowed by sand. The dying screams of its crew echoed across the coms before being cut short. Zorth's claws clenched. This was worse than even humanity's warnings. All Dominion vessels hold formation. Hit their flanks. He barked. The Indomitable surged forward, moving with the ferocity of a predator striking prey, unleashing a storm of kinetic hellfire. Slug after slug hammered into the lead Erebus behemoth, but the creature ship twisted unnaturally. It learned, it adapted, and then it did the unthinkable. The Erebus vessel split apart, jagged plates peeling back to reveal a yawning maw, tendrils writhing, molten energy churning within. Without warning, it lunged. Brace! The Indomitable barely rolled aside as the Erebus monstrosity engulfed a nearby Union vessel hull. It swallowed, consumed, leaving nothing but warped debris. The ship's remains twisted, reshaping, warping until they became something else, something Erebus. Horror surged through Zorth's chest. They weren't merely destroying ships, they were claiming them. Target the cores. Do not engage their hulls directly. Grant's voice cut through the coms, calm yet edged with urgency. They absorb. Energy strike only with kinetics, Zorth snarled. Then let's see how they endure this. The Sovereign Wrath powered up its singularity cannons, ancient Dominion relics, locked away for millennia. These were not weapons of plasma or steel. They unleashed void itself, collapsing spheres of gravity, miniature black holes that devoured anything they touched. The first singularity round struck. The Erebus warform convulsed, a section of its body imploding inward as black tendrils lashed. Violently. A shriek tore across every channel, not a sound but a vibration felt in marrow. The creature could feel pain, yet it did not die. Its wound sealed, flesh rippling, hardening, adapting. Already evolving. Zor cursed under his breath. They were learning faster than predicted. The battle had barely begun, yet Dominion and Union. Ships fell by the dozens. The Erebus did not simply kill. They consumed, assimilated, grew stronger with every strike. And then, something changed. The Indomitable surged forward, reckless in its charge, plowing through wreckage, ignoring torrents of incoming fire. Its forward bays split open. Zorth's eyes widened. What were the humans doing? He had seen them use railguns, plasma missiles, tactics brutal yet efficient. But this was madness. The Indomitable shed sections of its own armor, releasing swarms of autonomous drones. Thousands of them, each armed with plasma charges lined with neutron destabilizers designed not to destroy, but to unravel molecular bonds themselves, fire at will. The drones dove into Erebus wounds, detonating deep inside, tearing apart regenerating tissue, halting their adaptation. Erebus vessels shuddered, forms fracturing, cohesion breaking. For the first time in the battle, the Erebus faltered. They retreated. Not in fear, not in panic, but in silence, watching, calculating. That was the only word Zorth could think of as he watched the Erebus slip back into the abyss. They had tested the alliance. They had measured its strength. And now, they would prepare their next strike. Zorth released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had survived barely. A third of the fleet was gone. Thousands of lives erased in moments. He turned to Grant, his voice low. We weren't fighting to win. Were we? Grant's gaze lingered on the void where the Erebus had vanished. His jaw tightened. No, they were scouting. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Both men understood the truth neither wanted to say. Next time, Zorth muttered, they won't just be testing us. Next time they'll finish it. The galaxy was at war. Royan Prime had been only the opening strike, a brutal skirmish that left the Alliance bloodied but standing. Yet survival meant nothing. The Erebus had learned. They were adapting. And they would return. Reports began streaming in, each one more dire than the last. Colonies silent overnight, fleets eradicated in hours. Entire sectors consumed. The Erebus weren't simply destroying, they were assimilating, evolving with every battle. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Elias Grant stood before the tactical display, his expression carved from stone. The galactic map bled red zones, spreading outward like infection through veins. Star systems blinked out one after another, each marked contaminated. They weren't merely losing. They were collapsing. The first true Erebus invasion came at Jan, a Dominion fortress world fortified beyond reckoning. 10 full battle groups assembled, human, Royan, Tari, and dozens of lesser factions. If anywhere could hold, it was Jan, but this was not Royan Prime. When the Erebus came, they didn't arrive through warp corridors or FTL lanes. They manifested space folding open like a wound, spilling their grotesque warforms into the system. The Alliance opened fire instantly, unleashing plasma beams, railgun volleys, and antimatter torpedoes. The void burned with light and fury. The Erebus did not flinch. Where once their adaptation took minutes, now it happened in real time. Armor twisted, reshaping. Organic latticeworks redirected plasma. Hulls hardened against slugs mid-flight. By the time the Alliance shifted tactics, it was already too late. The Erebus were upon them, and then came something worse. The first casualties weren't ships. They were mines. A psychic pulse rippled through the system, silent yet deafening. A scream without sound that echoed across every channel. Not destruction. Corruption. Crew members staggered, clutching their heads as alien hunger invaded their thoughts. Screams erupted across the fleet, then silence. Eyes turned black, movements stilled. One by one, they rose not as themselves, but as something else. Want me to carry this forward into the full psychic horror phase, showing how the Erebus turned crew into conduits and weaponized living minds against the fleet? Stiffened, and then they turned on their own cruise ship after ship went silent, their crews overtaken by the Erebus hive mind. They didn't just lose vessels to destruction. They lost them to the Indomitable. Battle lasted less than 30 minutes. Jan F. Felva. Erebus didn't conquer Theplanet. They didn't destroy it, they absorbed it. The very surface of fuel began to shift black, tendrils creeping across the terrain, cities twisting into grotesque alien structuresses. If the planet itself had become enough them, and then it was gone, not destroyed, not left in ruins. Gone. Erebus took the entire world, and Geron was never seen again. The news spread like wildfire. The Erebus weren't just winning, they were consuming the alien secract worlds. Began defecting. Some species fled into deep space, abandoning war entirely. Others turned on their allies, believing that humanity had provoked the Erebus into this war. Civil war erupted in sectors that should have been united against the threat, and Therabi spread on the bridge of the sovereign Wrath. High Captain Zorth faced the growing reality of defeat. His people, Theroyan Dominion, had ruled vast sectors off space for millennia. They had faced invasions, civil wars, and galactic disters, but this was different. This was themed. He turned to the holographic figure of Captain Grant, standing firm aboard the Indomitable. Cannot hold, we cannot win, we must flee. Grant's expression was stone. There's nowhere to run to. If we fall back, they'll just keep spreading. Zorth bared his teeth, and Ifuste ready for the first time in its history. Alliance fractured, entire fleets abandoned their posts. Some sought to make deals with the Erebus, as if they could bargain with something that unlicked new hunger. Others simply vanished, taking their species and their ships into the void, hoping to escape the inevitable. The Erebus attacked Earth next, the heart of human civilization, the birthplace of the species that had first sounded the alarm. The greatest fleet ever assembled waited in high orbit. 300 capital ships, thousands of escort craft, every planetary defense platform armed and ready. And it wasn't enough. Erebus did not attack from the void. They emerged from inside the fleet itself. Captured ships, once thought lost, suddenly powered back on their weapons, turned inward. Entire battle groups were infected before they even knew what had happened. The orbital defense network fired blindly as Erebus war forms descended toward Earth's surface. They hit the atmosphere like a living plague. Black tendrils spreading across continents and entire cities, being absorbed into their ever-growing massed fight was hopeless. And then the unthinkable happened. Humanity had one last option, a weapon so devastating, Sophanal, that it had never been used in recorded history. Project Excalibur, a weapon designed not to destroy planets, but to erase them. The last transmission from Earth was a single command: detonate, and then the planet was gone, not destroyed, not left in ruins. Gone, a hole remained where Earth had been, a wound in space itself, a tear in the fabric of reality. The Erebus invasion had been stopped, but at a cost so great humanity ceased to be a home world species. The Indomitable and its fleetscaped, but they did not celebrate. Humanity had won one battle, but they had lost everything. The Erebus were still out there, and now they knew that the Alliance was desperate. From the shadows of deep space, the remnants of fleet prepared for the final stand. There was no victory left to hope for, no home to return to. There was only one last battle, one final mission to make sure the Erebus never spread beyond this galaxy, even if it meant burning everything To the ground a dying Galaxia, shattered alliance, a relentless Anemeth war was lost, and yet the war was not over the remnants of the once mighty alliance, what was left of humanity, Therian dominion. The Tari Protectorate, and a few scattered fleets of other species, fled to the farthest reaches off space. There was no sanctuary, no safe haven, only the cold, uncharted abyss where the Erebus had not yet reached, but survival was not an option. This was not a war that could be endured, it was a war that had to be ended aboard battered flagship Indomitable Thellist War Council Convent. High Captain Zorth, scarred and weary, spoke first. We cannot win a war of attrition. The Erebus consume, they evolveth, the adapt. There is no bargaining nostalmate. This ends one of two ways, Weddy, or they do. Captain Elias Grant, the last serving leader of the Terran fleet, leaned forward. Then we stop running, we stop retreating, we take the fight. Totham silence. Zora's golden eyes narrow weds aside. Grant gave a bitter smile. On life we fail. They had one advantage left, one final desperate chance, the destruction of Earth. Earth had wounded the Erebus. It was the first time they had suffered a true loss. When humanity detonated Project Excalibur, it had erased a part of their hive mind, severed it, as if cutting off a limb. The Erebus had reacted, they had recoiled. For the first time they had hesitated, which meant they could be killed if they struck at the heart of the Erebus, if they found their core intelligence, the thing that guided the swarm. There was a chance, a slim impossible chance. There's an old human saying. Grant murmured, cut off the head and the body. These, it was madness, it was their only hope. The intelligence reports were a fragmented, unreliable, desperate whispers from deep space probes that barely served long enough to transmit their data, but they all pointed to one, a terrifying reality. The Erebus had a center, a hive core. It was not a planet nor a star system. It was a living construct the size of a moon, pulsing with an intelligence beyond comprehension. The source destroy it, and the Erebus might collapse. Miss and Thellist remnants of the galaxy would be devoured. The plan was simple: find the source, penetrate its defenses, deliver the weapon humanity's last super weapon. The second and final Excalibur warhead had been built in secret before Earth fell, designed to erase existence itself. The warhead could not just destroy Butanmake. If they could detonate it at the heart of the Erebus mind, they could burn the entire swarm from the inside out. A fleet of less than 100 ships, the last of the Alliance, set course for the abyss beyond the known galaxy. To the hive's beating heart, the Erebus sensed them long before they arrived. They did not send a fleet to intercept. They did not engage in battle. Instead, the Indomitable, its fleet, were pulled into the Abyssinto, a churning mass of writhing blackened space, a region where the laws of physics no longer applied. The source loomed before them, a monstrous pulsating entity, not a structure, but a living thing, larger than any moon, shifting and shaping itself with incomprehensibly Then the whispers began. The Erebus did not speak in words. They spoke through thought, through terror. Through the screams of those they had taken, the voices of the dead filled the calm channels. Familiar voices, lost crew, friends, family. They were mocking. Then Captain Grant clenched his fists. Ignorate. Full burn were going, and the fleet charged into the storm. The battle was unlike anything that had come before. There were no ships in the conventional sense, only masses of shifting biomass tendrils, the size of battle cruisers, entire vessels being swallowed whole by the very space around them. The Indomitable led the charge, weapons firing in all directions. Kutinga passed through the living nightmare. One by one their ships fell, consumed, overtaken, turned against them, but they pushed forward through the storm, through the madness, until Thesaurus loomed before them. Its pulsing blackened heart, exposed. The Excalibur warhead had to be delivered manually. There would be no escape. Captain Grant stood before his crew, looking into the faces of those who had followed him to the end. No orders, no speeches, just Anid. Then he boarded the last strike craft, Excalibur-class bomber carrying Fuepan that would end the Warzar's voice crackled over the comms. Eudothus, there's no coming back. Grant smiled. Never Planeto. Then he was gone, diving into Thebes. The source reacted, sensing Thethreat writhing, twisting its very form to stop him. Grant pushed forward through tendrils, the madness, the screaming voices of the dead. One last push, one final moment. He closed his eyes and whispered for Earth detonation. The universe went silent. Fewer was over. The Erebus screamed a scream that rippled across the stars, a death cry that shook the fabric of space itself, and then they collapsed. Every infected world, every corrupted fleet, every Erebus construct, simply said they did not die. They were erased. The remnants of the fleet, barely a dozen ships, drifted in the aftermath. A galaxy saved at the cost of everything. Captain Grant was gone, but his name would never be forgotten. The war was over, but Theskers would never heal. Earth was gone. Humanity was homeless. The Alliance was dead, but life continued among the stars. Survivors rebuilt humanity, and Itzilis became nomads. Wanderers spreading across the void like the embers of Adang fire. They had won, but the galaxy will never be the same. And in the dark corners of the cosmos, beyond the edge of known space, something watched and waited.